the dust devil that tore through the outskirts of Sierra City, Nevada in the summer of 1878 carried with it the last remnants of Willa Owens' dreams, scattering them across the unforgiving desert like ashes from a long dead fire. She stood outside the weathered timber frame that had once been her home, watching as two men from the bank hammered a notice onto the front door. The sound of each strike echoed through her chest like a funeral drum. Her husband had been dead for 8 months now, taken by pneumonia during the harsh winter, and the debts he had left behind were finally catching up to her. The small ranch they had built together, the life they had planned, all of it was slipping through her fingers like water through cupped hands. "You have until the end of the week, Mrs. Owens," the taller banker said, his voice devoid of sympathy. "After that, the property reverts to the bank." Willa nodded numbly, unable to find words. She was 24 years old and felt ancient. Her dark blonde hair, once carefully pinned and styled, hung in a simple braid down her back. Her calico dress was patched in 3 places, and her boots had worn so thin she could feel every rock beneath her feet. She had sold everything of value months ago, trying to stay afloat. The livestock was gone. The furniture was gone. All she had left were some clothes, a few cooking implements, and a determination that was rapidly crumbling into dust. As the bankers rode away, Willa walked back into the house that would not be hers much longer. She sat at the small wooden table and put her head in her hands. For the first time since her husband's death, she allowed herself to truly feel the weight of her situation. She had no family to turn to. Her parents had died in a cholera outbreak when she was 17, and her husband's family back east had never approved of their marriage. She was alone in a territory that showed little mercy to anyone, let alone a woman without means. The tears came then, hot and bitter. She had tried so hard. She had taken in laundry, done mending, even worked cleaning rooms at the hotel in town. But it was never enough. The debt was too large, and the world seemed determined to crush her beneath its heel. Her hope, that fragile thing she had nursed since childhood, was flickering like a candle in a windstorm. 3 days later, Willa found herself standing in the general store, counting out her last few coins for a small bag of cornmeal and some beans. She was trying to calculate how long she could stretch her supplies when she heard raised voices outside. Through the window, she saw a cowboy being shoved by 2 rough-looking men. The cowboy was tall and lean, with sun-bronzed skin and dark brown hair that curled slightly at his collar. He wore typical ranch clothes, dusty from travel, and had a bedroll tied to his saddle. "We don't want your kind working around here," one of the men snarled. "Get back on that horse and ride out." The cowboy's voice was calm but firm. "The foreman at the Double R hired me fair and square. I am not looking for trouble." "You are trouble just by being here," the other man spat. Willa recognized the 2 men as ranch hands from one of the larger spreads outside town. They were known for drinking too much and causing problems. The store owner, Mr. Henderson, muttered something about keeping the peace but made no move to intervene. Before she could think better of it, Willa stepped outside. "Excuse me, gentlemen," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I believe Sheriff Morgan is making his rounds. He should be coming down Main Street any moment now." It was a bluff. She had no idea where the sheriff was, but the 2 men exchanged glances, clearly unwilling to risk a confrontation with the law. With a few more muttered curses, they backed away and headed toward the saloon. The cowboy turned to Willa, and she found herself looking into the most striking pair of gray-green eyes she had ever seen. He touched the brim of his hat respectfully. "Thank you, madam. That was quick thinking." "They are all bluster," Willa said, though her heart was pounding. "Usually they back down if they think consequences might follow." "Usually," the the cowboy agreed with a slight smile. "I am grateful nonetheless. The name is Parker Preston, Willa Owens." They stood there for a moment in the afternoon heat, and Willa felt something shift inside her, something she could not quite name. It was not attraction, not yet, but rather a recognition of sorts. This man had the look of someone who understood what it meant to stand on the outside looking in. "Well, Mrs. Owens, I should let you get back to your business," Parker said, noting the ring she still wore on her left hand. "It is just Miss Owens now," Willa said quietly. "Or rather, it was Mrs. My husband passed last winter." Something softened in Parker's expression. "I am sorry for your loss. Thank you." She hesitated, then added, "Good luck with your work at the Double R. It is a good outfit." Parker nodded and headed toward his horse, and Willa went back inside to collect her meager purchases. As she walked back toward her soon-to-be former home, she found herself thinking about those gray-green eyes and the quiet dignity in the way Parker had handled those men. It was a pleasant distraction from the dread that had become her constant companion. The next morning, Willa woke to the sound of hammering. Confused, she threw on her robe and hurried outside to find Parker Preston on her roof, replacing shingles. "What are you doing?" she called up. Parker looked down, not seeming at all surprised to see her. "Morning, Miss Owens. I was riding past yesterday evening and noticed you had some shingles missing. Figured it would not take long to patch them up." "I cannot pay you," Willa said immediately. "Did I ask for payment?" Willa frowned. "Why would you do this?" Parker climbed down the ladder he had propped against the house. Up close, Willa could see he was probably around 26 or 27, with laugh lines around his eyes despite the serious set of his mouth. "You helped me yesterday when you did not have to. Seemed only right to return the kindness. Fixing 2 shingles is hardly equal to stopping a confrontation." "Maybe not," Parker acknowledged. "But I had some time this morning before I need to be at the ranch, and I had the materials. Sometimes kindness is not about keeping score." Willa felt something crack inside her chest, a tiny fissure in the wall she had built around herself. "Would you like some coffee? It is not much, but I can offer you that." Parker's smile was genuine and warm. "I would like that very much." They sat at her small table, drinking bitter coffee made from grounds Willa had used twice before, and talked. Parker told her he had grown up in Missouri, the son of a farmer who had lost everything after the war. He had headed west at 19, working various ranch jobs, learning the trade. He had been to Colorado, Wyoming, and now Nevada, always moving, always looking for something he could not quite name. "And you?" Parker asked. "How did you come to Sierra City?" Willa told him about meeting her husband Thomas in San Francisco. He had been a clerk with dreams of owning land, and she had been working in a boarding house, trying to save enough money to start a small dress shop. They had married quickly, perhaps too quickly, driven by loneliness as much as love. Thomas had heard about opportunities in Nevada, and they had come east together, buying this small property with borrowed money. They had been happy enough in a quiet way, but they had never quite managed to get ahead. And then Thomas had gotten sick, and everything had fallen apart. "The bank is taking the property in 3 days," Willa said, surprised at herself for sharing this. "I have nowhere to go and no means to start over." Parker was quiet for a long moment, his calloused hands wrapped around the tin cup. "Have you considered looking for work at one of the larger ranches? Some of them hire women for cooking and housekeeping. It would be room and board at least." "I have asked," Willa admitted. "Most places already have someone or they are not hiring. The Double R told me they had someone just last week." "What about Virginia City? It is bigger, more opportunities." "I would need money to get there, money to live on while I looked for work." Willa shook her head. "I have been over this 1,000 times. Every path leads to a wall." Parker finished his coffee and stood. "I should get to work. Thank you for the coffee, Miss Owens." "Thank you for the roof," Willa replied, walking him to the door. As Parker mounted his horse, he turned back to her. "Hope is a stubborn thing, Miss Owens. It grows in the strangest places, often where you least expect it." Then he was gone, riding toward the Double R Ranch, leaving Willa standing in her doorway with a strange warmth in her chest that she had not felt in months. Over the next 2 days, Parker appeared each morning before heading to the ranch. He fixed the broken step on her porch. He repaired a section of fence. He brought her a chicken, claiming the ranch had too many and would she mind taking one off their hands. It was an obvious fiction, but Willa accepted it with gratitude. The chicken meant eggs, and eggs meant protein she desperately needed. "Why are you doing this?" Willa asked on the second morning, watching as Parker reinforced the gate to her small yard. Parker did not look up from his work. "My mother used to say that kindness is like water. You pour it out where it is needed and something grows. Maybe flowers, maybe crops, maybe just the strength to face another day." "Your mother sounds wise." "She was. She died when I was 16. Fever took her." Parker finished with the gate and tested it, nodding with satisfaction. "After she passed, people in our community brought us food, helped with the farm work. My father was so deep in his grief he could barely function. Those acts of kindness kept us going. I learned then that sometimes the smallest gestures matter the most." Willa felt tears prick her eyes. "I feel like I am drowning," she whispered, "and I cannot find the surface." Parker came over to where she stood, maintaining a respectful distance but close enough that she could see the genuine concern in his eyes. "You are stronger than you know, Willa. The fact that you are still standing, still trying, that takes courage." It was the first time he had used her given name, and something about it made her feel seen in a way she had not felt in a very long time. That afternoon, after Parker had left for his work, Willa went into town to see if any last-minute miracle might save her home. She stopped by the bank, the sheriff's office, even the church. Everywhere she turned, she found sympathy but no solutions. As she walked back toward her property, the weight of her impending homelessness settled over her like a shroud. She was so lost in her thoughts that she almost collided with Parker, who was leading his horse down the road. "Whoa there," Parker said, steadying her with a gentle hand on her arm. "You all right?" "I am fine," Willa said automatically, then shook her head. "No, I am not fine. Tomorrow the bank takes everything and I have no plan, no options. I am not fine at all." Parker was quiet for a moment, then said, "Walk with me." They walked together away from town, into the scrubland that stretched toward the mountains. The evening air was cooling, and the sky was beginning to paint itself in shades of orange and pink. Parker led his horse with one hand, keeping pace with Willa's slower steps. "I have a proposition," Parker said finally. "Hear me out before you answer." Willa looked at him warily. "What kind of proposition?" "The Double R has a line shack up in the high country. It is used during roundup and when we are moving cattle through the summer pastures. Right now, it is empty. You could stay there, at least temporarily. It would give you time to figure out your next step." "I cannot accept charity," Willa said immediately. "It is not charity. The place needs a caretaker. Someone to keep it maintained, make sure drifters do not move in, maybe do some cooking when the crew is up there. It would not be much, but there would be some pay attached. Not a lot, but enough for supplies." Willa stopped walking. "Why would you do this? You barely know me." Parker met her eyes directly. "Because I have been where you are. Maybe not the exact same circumstances, but I have known what it feels like to have the ground disappear beneath your feet. Someone helped me then. I am helping you now. That is how it works. What if your foreman says no? He will not. I already talked to him. He thinks it is a good idea." Willa felt a complicated rush of emotions. Pride wanted her to refuse. But survival, that deep instinct that had kept her going through the worst months of her life, told her to accept. "I would work," she said firmly. "Whatever needs doing, I would earn my keep." "I know you would," Parker said, and his smile was like sunrise. The next day, Parker arrived with a wagon borrowed from the ranch. Together, they loaded Willa's few remaining possessions. She left the key to the house on the kitchen table for the bank to collect. As the wagon pulled away, Willa allowed herself one look back at the place where she had tried to build a life. Then she turned forward toward the mountains and whatever came next. The lined shack was rough but solid. A single room with a stone fireplace, a narrow bed, a table, and some shelves. It was clean and dry, which was more than Willa had dared hope for. Parker helped her unload her things, then showed her where the well was, where firewood was stored, and how to bar the door at night. "I will be back in a few days to check on you," Parker said. "If you need anything before then, the main ranch house is about an hour's ride down the trail. Just follow the markers." "Parker," Willa said as he was about to leave. "Thank you. I know I keep saying it, but I do not know how else to express what this means to me." Parker stepped closer, and for a moment, Willa thought he might reach for her hand. But he simply touched his hat and said, "You would do the same if our positions were reversed. I can see that about you." After he left, Willa explored her new home. It was sparse, certainly, but it was shelter. It was safety. It was a chance. She found a broom in the corner and began sweeping, then wiped down the shelves and aired out the blankets. The simple act of making the space her own, of having somewhere to belong even temporarily, made her feel more human than she had in months. As the sun set and darkness filled the high country, Willa lit the oil lamp Parker had left for her and sat at the small table. For the first time in so long, she allowed herself to feel something other than despair. It was not quite hope, not yet, but it was adjacent to it. A cousin of hope. A possibility. Parker came back 3 days later with supplies: flour, salt, coffee, dried beans, and some fresh vegetables from the ranch garden. He also brought news that a crew would be coming up to the high pastures in a week to check the herd, and they would need meals prepared. "How are you settling in?" Parker asked, accepting the coffee Willa offered him. "It is good," Willa said honestly. "Quiet but good. I cleaned everything, checked the roof, made sure the fireplace draws properly. I even found some wild herbs growing nearby that I can use for cooking." "You are a natural," Parker said with approval. Over coffee, they fell into easy conversation. Parker told her stories about the ranch, about the horses he was training, about the other hands and their various quirks. Willa found herself laughing, genuine laughter that felt rusty but real. "What about you?" Parker asked. "What did you do before you married? You mentioned working in San Francisco." "I worked at a boarding house, like I said, but what I really wanted was to design dresses. I loved taking fabric and turning it into something beautiful, something that made a woman feel special." Willa smiled at the memory. "I made my own wedding dress. It was not fancy, but I was proud of it. You still have it. I sold it months ago." Willa tried to keep the bitterness from her voice. "Someone bought it to remake into christening gowns." Parker was quiet for a moment. "That is a loss. But the skill, the knowledge, that is still yours. No one can take that." It was such a simple observation, but it struck Willa deeply. She had been so focused on everything she had lost that she had forgotten what remained. Her skills, her strength, her ability to create something from nothing. Those things were still hers. As Parker prepared to leave, he hesitated at the door. "Willa, I know your situation is difficult right now. But I want you to know that I see you as more than someone in need of help. I see you as someone remarkable, someone who keeps going even when everything tells you to give up." That takes a special kind of courage. Before Willa could respond, Parker was out the door and mounting his horse. She stood in the doorway, watching him ride away, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. The following week, the crew arrived as promised. There were 6 men, all seasoned ranch hands, and they were surprised but pleased to find Willa there with hot food waiting. She had made a large pot of stew using the supplies Parker had brought, plus some wild onions she had foraged. The men ate gratefully, and their foreman, a gruff man named Sam, nodded his approval. "Preston said you were capable." "Good to see he was right," Sam said. "We will be up here for 4 days. 3 meals a day would be appreciated, and we will pay fair for it." "I will need some more supplies," Willa said practically. "Make a list. Parker will bring what you need tomorrow." Sure enough, Parker arrived the next morning with a pack horse loaded with provisions. He stayed to help Willa prepare the midday meal, working alongside her with an easy familiarity that felt both comfortable and charged with something unspoken. "You seem happy," Parker observed as they cut vegetables. "I feel useful," Willa admitted. "These past months I have felt like such a burden, like everything I touched turned to dust. This is the first time in forever that I feel like I am contributing something meaningful." "You have always been meaningful, Willa. Your value does not depend on what you can produce." Willa set down her knife and looked at Parker, really looked at him. He was not a classically handsome man, but there was something deeply attractive about him. The way he moved with quiet confidence, the way he spoke with such sincere kindness, the way he looked at her like she mattered. "How is it that you are unmarried?" Willa asked before she could stop herself. "Surely some woman has tried to catch you." Parker laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his face. "I have been asked that before. The truth is, I have never found someone who understood this life, who saw it as I do. Most women I have met want stability, a house in town, a life that looks a certain way. I do not blame them for that. But I have always been drawn to the open country, the work of ranching. I need someone who sees beauty in this rough life, not someone who would tolerate it while dreaming of something else." "What about now?" Willa asked softly. "Have you found someone?" Parker met her eyes, and the intensity there made her breath catch. "I am beginning to think I might have." The air between them seemed to thicken. Willa was acutely aware of how close they were standing, how easy it would be to lean forward, to close the distance between them. But something held her back. Fear, maybe, or the memory of her husband, or simply the knowledge that her life was still so uncertain. The moment was broken by the sound of horses approaching. The crew was returning for their meal. Parker stepped back, the spell broken, and they finished preparing the food in charged silence. Over the next few days, Willa found herself watching for Parker. He came by each morning, ostensibly to check on supplies or help with heavy work, but Willa sensed there was more to it. They would talk while they worked, sharing stories and comfortable silences in equal measure. Willa learned that Parker had a younger sister back in Missouri who had married a shopkeeper, that his father had died 3 years ago, that he sent money home whenever he could to help his sister's family. Parker learned that Willa had always dreamed of having children, that she loved thunderstorms despite their rarity in Nevada, that she had taught herself to read using old newspapers and a borrowed Bible. They learned each other's habits, preferences, the small details that build intimacy. On the 4th evening, after the crew had ridden back to the main ranch, Parker stayed to help Willa clean up. As they washed dishes in a basin outside, the sun setting behind the mountains, Parker said, "They will be coming back up in 2 weeks. Sam wants to offer you regular work. Cooking during roundup, maintaining this place year-round. It would be steady employment, Willa, a real position." Willa felt a surge of emotion so strong she had to grip the edge of the basin. "Truly," Truly. Sam says you are the best camp cook they have had. And I might have mentioned that you can also sew, which means you could do mending for the crew. Extra income. Parker Preston, you are an angel in disguise, Willa said, her voice thick. I am just a man who recognizes quality when he sees it. Parker dried his hands on a towel and turned to face her fully. Willa, I need to be honest with you about something. All right, Willa said, nervous suddenly. I did not just happen to ride past your property that first day. I heard in town that you were losing your home, and I wanted to see if there was anything I could do. I had already talked to Sam about the line shack before I ever fixed your roof. Willa frowned. But why? You did not know me. I knew of you. People in town talked about Thomas Owen's widow, about how hard you were trying to make ends meet. And then when I met you, when you stood up for me against those men, I knew I had been right to want to help. You are strong, Willa. You are kind. You deserve a chance to rebuild. I do not know what to say. Say you will stay. Say you will accept the job. Say you will let yourself have this opportunity. Parker stepped closer. And maybe, if I am not overstepping, say you will let me court you properly. Willa's heart was pounding so hard she was sure Parker could hear it. Court me. I know it is soon. I know you are still grieving your husband, but Willa, from the moment I met you, I have felt something I have never felt before. You are not just someone I want to help. You are someone I want to know deeply and completely, someone I want to build something with. I am broken, Willa whispered. I am a mess of debt and grief and shattered dreams. You are not broken, you are healing, and maybe we could heal together. Parker reached out and gently took her hand. I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I am just asking for a chance. Let me show you what it looks like when someone sees you, truly sees you, and chooses to stay. Willa looked down at their joined hands. Parker's hand was larger than hers, calloused from work, warm and steady. It felt right in a way that made her want to cry. Yes, she said quietly, yes to the job and yes to courting. But slowly, Parker, I need to take this slowly. Slowly is good, Parker agreed, his smile brilliant. I am a patient man. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. A gesture so tender that Willa felt something deep inside her begin to thaw. It was like the first warm day after a long winter, that moment when you realize that spring might actually come, that life might continue after all. After Parker left that night, Willa sat outside the line shack, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. For the first time since Thomas died, she allowed herself to imagine a future. Not just survival, but an actual life. A life with work she could take pride in, a place she belonged, and maybe, just maybe, love. Real love, the kind built on mutual respect and understanding rather than convenience and loneliness. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Willa Deep cleaned the line shack, organized supplies, and prepared for the crew's return. But she also took time for herself, something she had not done in years. She walked through the high country, learning the land. She picked wildflowers and put them in a jar on her table. She mended her clothes, taking care with the stitches, making them neat and strong. Parker visited every few days, always with a legitimate reason, supplies or news or a question from Sam, but they both knew these were excuses. They would sit together in the evenings, talking until the stars came out. Parker told her about his dreams of someday having a small ranch of his own, just enough to make a living and live the way he wanted. Willa shared her memories of her parents, stories she had not told anyone in years, painful but necessary to share. You ever feel guilty? Willa asked one evening. About being happy when someone you loved is gone, Parker considered the question seriously. Sometimes. When my father died, I felt relief mixed with the grief because he had been so miserable after losing my mother. The relief made me feel terrible, like I was a bad son. But my sister told me something wise. She said that the dead do not want us to stop living. They want us to carry them in our hearts and keep moving forward. Happiness honors them, not betrays them. I think I needed to hear that, Willa said softly. Parker reached over and took her hand, a gesture that had become natural between them. Thomas would want you to be happy, Willa. I am certain of it. When the crew returned, Willa was ready. She had a system now, meals prepared efficiently, the line shack running smoothly. The men treated her with respect, partly because she was good at her job and partly because they knew Parker Preston would not tolerate anything less. One of the hands, a young man named Jimmy, made the mistake of making a suggestive comment to Willa one afternoon. Before she could respond, Parker was there, his usual calm demeanor replaced with something cold and dangerous. "Apologize to Miss Owens," Parker said quietly. "I was just joking," Jimmy protested. "Apologize. Now." The threat in Parker's voice was unmistakable. Jimmy quickly apologized and Parker added, "If I hear you speak to her with anything less than complete respect again, you will be looking for work elsewhere. Are we clear?" "Yes, sir," Jimmy muttered. After the young man scurried away, Willa touched Parker's arm. "Thank you, but I can handle myself." "I know you can, but you should not have to." Parker's jaw was still tight with anger. "You deserve to work without dealing with that kind of disrespect." "My knight in dusty chaps," Willa said, trying to lighten the mood. Parker finally smiled. "I would look ridiculous in shining armor anyway." That evening, after the crew had settled in for the night, Parker asked Willa to walk with him. They climbed to a small rise overlooking the valley. The ranch spread out below them like a patchwork quilt in the fading light. "I love this view," Parker said. "Sometimes when everything feels too complicated, I come up here and remember how big the world is, how small my troubles are in comparison." "It is beautiful," Willa agreed. She was acutely aware of Parker's presence beside her, the warmth of his body in the cooling air. "Willa, I want to kiss you," Parker said suddenly. "I have wanted to for weeks now, but I do not want to rush you or make you uncomfortable, so I am asking permission." Willa's breath caught. She turned to face him, studying his face in the twilight. This man who had appeared in her life when she had nothing left, who had offered kindness without expecting anything in return, who had slowly and carefully rebuilt her ability to hope. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, you can kiss me." Parker cupped her face gently with both hands, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. He moved slowly, giving her time to change her mind, and then his lips were on hers. The kiss was tender and careful, a question and an answer all at once. Willa felt herself melt into it, her hands coming up to grip his shirt, anchoring herself against the wave of emotion. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Parker rested his forehead against hers. "I am falling in love with you, Willa Owens. I think I have been since the moment you bluffed those men into leaving me alone." "I am falling too," Willa admitted. "It terrifies me, but I am falling." "Then we will fall together," Parker said and kissed her again. Over the following months, their relationship deepened. Parker was true to his word about taking things slowly, never pushing for more than Willa was ready to give. They spent their evenings talking, learning each other's minds as thoroughly as they were learning each other's hearts. Parker taught Willa to ride better, taking her on long rides through the high country. Willa taught Parker to appreciate poetry, reading to him from a book he had bought for her in town. The work at the line shack became a true position. Sam officially hired Willa as camp cook and caretaker, with a salary that allowed her to start saving money again. She took on mending work from the crew, and even began making shirts from fabric Parker brought her from town. Slowly, carefully, she was rebuilding her life. As summer turned to fall, Parker started talking more seriously about the future. He had been saving money for years, and he thought he might have enough to put a down payment on a small property. Nothing fancy, just enough land for some cattle and horses. Would you want to be part of that? Parker asked one evening as they sat by the fire in the line shack. The crew had gone back to the main ranch for the winter, and soon Willa would need to move to the bunkhouse at the main ranch for the cold months. A ranch, I mean. Would that be a life you would want, with you? Willa asked. With me. Willa set down her mending and moved to sit beside Parker on the narrow bed. Are you asking what I think you are asking? Parker took her hand, his expression serious and hopeful. Willa Owens, I know I am not a rich man. I cannot offer you a grand house or an easy life. But I can offer you a partnership, a life built on mutual respect and hard work and love, so much love. Will you marry me? Willa felt tears spill down her cheeks, but they were good tears, joyful tears. Yes, she said, laughing through her crying. Yes, Parker Preston, I will marry you. Parker pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and Willa felt the last of her old grief release its hold on her heart. She would always carry the memory of Thomas, but he was part of her past. Parker was her future, and that future suddenly looked bright and full of possibility. They were married in Sierra City in November of 1878, a simple ceremony at the church with Sam and some of the ranch hands as witnesses. Willa wore a new dress she had made herself, cream-colored calico with lace at the collar. Parker wore his best suit, his hair neatly trimmed, his eyes shining with happiness. The preacher pronounced them man and wife, and when Parker kissed her, Willa felt complete in a way she never had before. This was not a marriage born of loneliness or convenience. This was a true partnership. Two people who had found each other in the wilderness and chosen to build something together. They spent their wedding night at the hotel in town, a luxury they both considered worth the expense. In the morning, they rode back to the ranch together, not as two separate people but as a unit, a team over the winter. While they continued working at the Double R, Parker finalized the purchase of a small property about 10 miles from Sierra City. It was 200 acres of decent grazing land with a creek running through it and a small cabin that needed work but was structurally sound. They moved in the following spring, and Willa felt a sense of homecoming she had never experienced before. "This is ours," Parker said as they stood in front of the cabin. "Really ours. No bank can take it. No one can force us out. This is our beginning." Together, they worked to fix up the cabin. Parker repaired the roof and reinforced the walls while Willa cleaned and made curtains and created a home. They bought a small herd of cattle with Parker's savings and some additional money Willa had managed to save from her work. They planted a garden. They built a chicken coop and filled it with hens. It was hard work, exhausting work, but it was theirs. Every morning, Willa woke up beside Parker and felt grateful. Every evening, they sat together on the porch they had built and watched the sun set over land that belonged to them. In the fall of 1879, Willa discovered she was pregnant. She told Parker one evening after supper, nervous despite knowing he wanted children. "Are you sure?" Parker asked, his face transforming with joy. "As sure as I can be. I think it will be early spring." Parker let out a whoop and picked Willa up, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop. "We are having a baby," he said, setting her down gently. "Willa, we are having a baby." "Are you happy?" Willa asked, though she could see the answer on his face. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Parker said, kissing her soundly. The pregnancy was not easy. Willa was sick for months, struggling to keep food down. Parker was endlessly patient, taking over more of the household work, bringing her crackers and weak tea, sitting with her when the nausea was particularly bad. "I am sorry," Willa said one afternoon, frustrated by her body's betrayal. "For what?" Parker asked, genuinely confused. For not being able to do my share, for being so useless. Parker knelt beside the bed and took her hand. Willa, you are growing a person. You are creating life. That is the least useless thing imaginable. Everything else can wait. Their son was born in April of 1880, a long and difficult labor that left Willa exhausted but exhilarated. Parker was there through all of it, holding her hand, wiping her face with cool cloths, whispering encouragement. When the midwife finally placed the baby in Willa's arms, she looked down at his tiny red face and felt a love so fierce it almost frightened her. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "He is perfect," Parker said, his voice choked with emotion. "Willa, he is absolutely perfect." They named him Samuel, after Sam from the Double R, who had given Willa her first real job and treated her with consistent respect. Samuel Preston had his father's gray-green eyes and his mother's stubborn chin, and from the beginning, he was loved beyond measure. The years that followed were not without challenges. There were droughts and cattle illnesses, times when money was tight and the work seemed endless. But through it all, Parker and Willa faced everything together. They built their ranch slowly and carefully, never overextending, always planning for the long term. In 1882, their daughter arrived, a small, fierce thing they named Pearl. She had Willa's dark blonde hair and Parker's steady temperament. Samuel was delighted with his little sister, appointed himself her protector, and could often be found singing to her when she cried. By 1885, the Preston Ranch was thriving. They had expanded their herd, built a proper barn, and even hired a young man to help with the work. Willa had started selling her sewing in town, and her dresses had become popular among the women of Sierra City. She took pride in her work, in her ability to contribute financially while also raising their children. One evening in late summer, Parker and Willa sat on their porch watching Samuel chase fireflies while Pearl dozed in Willa's arms. The air was warm and sweet with the smell of hay and sage. "You remember the day we met?" Parker asked. "Of course." "You were about to get pummeled by those two idiots from the Carson Ranch," Parker laughed. "I like to think I could have handled them. Maybe, but you did not have to because I intervened. And I am grateful every day that you did." Parker reached over and took Willa's free hand. "Do you ever think about how different things might have been? If you had not stepped outside the store that day, if I had not noticed your roof needed fixing?" "Sometimes," Willa admitted. "But I think we would have found each other somehow. Some things are meant to be." "I do not know if I believe in fate," Parker said thoughtfully. "But I believe in kindness. I believe that when you put good into the world, good comes back to you. Maybe not always in the way you expect, but it comes." Willa looked at her husband, this man who had saved her when she had nothing left, who had watered her hope until it grew into something strong and beautiful. "Hope grows where it is watered with kindness," she said softly. "What is that?" "Something I just thought of. But it is true, is it not? My hope was nearly gone when we met. I was drowning in despair. But you were kind to me, over and over, expecting nothing in return. And that kindness gave my hope room to grow again. It grew into love, into this life we have built, all from kindness." Parker was quiet for a moment, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. "You gave me kindness too, Willa. You saw me as a person worth defending when those men wanted to run me out of town. You treated me with respect and dignity. You were not just someone I saved. We saved each other." "I like that," Willa said, leaning her head on Parker's shoulder. "I like the idea that we saved each other." Samuel ran up to the porch, his hands carefully cupped. "Papa, Mama, look, I caught one." He opened his hands slightly, and a firefly crawled across his palm, glowing softly in the gathering darkness. Parker and Willa admired it appropriately. And then Parker showed Samuel how to let it go gently so it could return to its family. As Samuel ran off again, Willa said, "I want to tell them the whole story someday, when they are older. I want them to know that life can be hard, that sometimes you lose everything, but that there is always hope, that kindness matters, that love can grow in the most unexpected places." "We will tell them together," Parker promised. "All of it. The hard parts and the good parts and everything in between." The sun finally set, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Willa called Samuel in for bed, and the Preston family went inside their home, a home built on hope and watered with kindness. Years continued to pass in the steady rhythm of ranch life. The children grew. Samuel became a skilled horseman, taking after his father in his quiet competence and love of the land. Pearl surprised everyone with her head for numbers, keeping the ranch accounts with impressive accuracy even as a young girl. In 1888, Willa and Parker welcomed another son whom they named Daniel. He was a surprise, born when Willa was 34 and had assumed her childbearing years were behind her. But he was a welcome surprise, a joyful addition to their family. The ranch continued to prosper. Parker's reputation as an honest rancher and skilled horseman spread through the territory, and they had more business than they could handle. Willa's sewing had evolved into a thriving side business, with women traveling from surrounding towns to order her dresses. One afternoon in 1890, a man from the bank in Sierra City rode out to their property. Willa felt a familiar spike of anxiety at the sight of him, memories of the day she had lost her first home flooding back. But the banker, a different man than the one who had foreclosed on her years ago, simply tipped his hat politely and asked to speak with Parker about a business matter. It turned out that Parker's credit was so good, the bank wanted to offer him a loan to expand his operation if he was interested. After the banker left, Willa found Parker standing by the barn staring at the loan papers. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I am thinking about how far we have come," Parker said, "about how different this is from where we started." Willa moved to stand beside him, slipping her hand into his. "Are you going to take the loan?" "I do not know. We are doing well as we are. Expanding would mean more risk, more work. But also more opportunity," Willa pointed out. "Parker, I trust your judgment." "Whatever you decide, we will make it work." Parker turned to her, his gray-green eyes serious. "That is the thing, Willa. It is not just my decision. This is our ranch, our life. We decide together." They talked through it over the next week, weighing options and possibilities. In the end, they decided to take a modest loan and buy the adjoining property, which had become available when its owner decided to return east. It was a calculated risk, but one they felt prepared to take. The expansion was successful. By 1893, the Preston Ranch was one of the most respected operations in the area. Parker hired more help, including a young couple who lived in the old line shack where Willa had once stayed. Seeing that cabin, now housing another family starting out, always made Willa smile. Samuel, now 13, was already talking about taking over the ranch someday. Pearl, 11, declared she wanted to go to San Francisco and become a businesswoman, a declaration that made Parker laugh and Willa feel secretly proud. Daniel, still small at 5, loved the horses more than anything and spent hours following his father around, mimicking his every move. In the fall of that year, Willa received word that her husband's family back east, the ones who had never approved of their marriage, had tried to make a claim on her original property. They had heard through some channel that there might be mineral rights worth pursuing. Willa had to travel to the county seat to provide documentation that she had lost that property to the bank years ago and had no legal connection to it anymore. Parker accompanied her, and on the journey, they passed by the old homestead. It was abandoned now, the bank having never found a buyer. The house was falling into disrepair, the land returning to desert. "You want to stop?" Parker asked. Willa considered, then shook her head. "No, that is not my home. It never really was. It was a place I lived, a place I tried to make something work. But it was never home the way our ranch is home. No regrets, not a single one. If things had not fallen apart there, I never would have ended up at the line shack. I never would have met you, not really. Everything that happened led me to where I am now, and I would not change any of it." Parker leaned over and kissed her temple. "You are a wise woman, Willa Preston." "I am a lucky woman," Willa corrected. "Lucky that a certain cowboy saw someone worth saving and decided to water my hope with kindness." They resolved the legal matter easily, the claim dismissed as baseless, and returned home to their children and their life. As the 19th century drew to a close, the Preston family celebrated the new year of 1900 with a gathering of friends and neighbors. Their home, which had started as a small cabin, had been expanded over the years into a comfortable ranch house. The barn was solid and well maintained. The herds were healthy. The garden flourished. It was everything they had worked for, everything they had dreamed of building together. That night, after the guests had left and the children were asleep, Parker and Willa stood outside looking at the stars, just as they had done countless times before. 22 years, Parker said. 22 years since I first saw you outside Henderson's store." "And you thought, there is a woman who looks like trouble," Willa teased. "I thought, there is a woman who looks like she has seen hardship but has not let it break her," Parker corrected. "I thought there is someone strong." "I did not feel strong then. I felt like I was made of glass, one more blow away from shattering completely. But you did not shatter. You bent, but you did not break. And when I offered you a hand up, you took it and ran with it." Parker pulled her close. "You made something of that chance, Willa. You built a business, raised amazing children, created a home. That was all you." "It was all us," Willa insisted. "Everything we have is because we worked together, because we chose each other every day." They stood in comfortable silence, wrapped in each other's arms until the cold drove them inside to the warmth of their home. The new century brought changes, some welcome and some challenging. Samuel did indeed take over more responsibilities on the ranch, showing the same steady work ethic as his father. Pearl eventually did go to San Francisco, attending a school for young women and returning with big ideas about accounting and business management. She helped modernize the ranch's bookkeeping and proved invaluable in negotiations with buyers and suppliers. Daniel, perhaps inevitably, became a horse trainer like his father. By the time he was 20, he had a reputation throughout Nevada for his skill with difficult horses. People traveled considerable distances to have Daniel Preston work with their animals. In 1905, Willa and Parker became grandparents when Samuel married a local girl named Catherine, and they quickly had a son. Holding that tiny baby, Willa felt the circle of life complete itself. She thought about all the years between that dark time when she had lost everything and this moment of abundance, and she marveled at the journey. "What are you thinking?" Parker asked, finding her sitting with the baby on the porch. "I am thinking about hope," Willa said. "About how it is the most fragile and most resilient thing. How it can be beaten down to almost nothing but still find a way to grow if someone just gives it a little water, a little kindness." Parker sat beside her, putting his arm around her shoulders. His hair was gray now, his face lined with years of sun and work, but his eyes were the same gray-green that had captured Willa's attention all those years ago. "You gave me hope too, you know," Parker said. "I did not even realize I was looking for something until I found you." I thought I was content with my life as it was, but you showed me what it could be to have a true partner, someone to build dreams with." "We built good dreams," Willa said, looking out at the ranch, at the land they had cultivated, at the home they had created. "Strong dreams." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the land, their grandson began to fuss. Willa soothed him with practiced ease, rocking gently. Catherine appeared to collect him for feeding, and Parker and Willa were left alone again. "Do you remember what you said that first day at the line shack?" Willa asked. "About kindness being like water." "I remember everything about those early days," Parker said. "You were right. Kindness is like water. It does not just help the person who receives it. It creates something that spreads, that grows, that feeds other things. You were kind to me. That kindness grew into our love, into our family, into this ranch. And now our children will take that out into the world, and maybe they will water someone else's hope." "That is a beautiful thought," Parker said. "It is a true thought," Willa insisted. "We are living proof of it." In the years that followed, the Preston Ranch continued to thrive. Pearl married a banker from Virginia City, a match that surprised no one given her head for business. They settled nearby, and Pearl continued to help manage the ranch's finances. Daniel married a girl who shared his love of horses, and together they started a breeding program that became renowned throughout the territory. Parker and Willa gradually stepped back from the daily operations, letting Samuel take over as the primary manager. They were not idle, still helping where needed, but they had earned their rest. They spent their days working in the garden, taking long rides through the high country, and spoiling their growing number of grandchildren. In 1912, as they celebrated their 34th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a party. There was music and dancing, abundant food and laughter that echoed across the valley. As Parker and Willa danced together in the yard, moving slowly to a fiddle tune, Samuel approached and asked to cut in. "May I dance with my mother?" he asked. Parker bowed gallantly and relinquished Willa to their son. As they danced, Samuel said, "I want to thank you, Mama." "For what, dear?" "For showing me what strength looks like. For teaching me that when life knocks you down, you get back up. For demonstrating every day that hope and hard work can build something meaningful." Willa felt tears prick her eyes. "You give me too much credit." "No, I do not give you enough. I know the story, Mama. I know where you came from, what you survived. And I know that I would not be here. None of us would be here if you had given up. But you did not. You kept going." "I had help," Willa said, glancing over at Parker, who was now dancing with Pearl. "Your father gave me a chance when I had nothing." "You both saved each other," Samuel said. "That is what you have always told us. That is what you have shown us. And that is what I try to do with Catherine, what I hope to teach our children, that we are stronger together." The song ended, and Samuel kissed his mother's cheek before returning her to Parker. As Parker took Willa back into his arms, he asked, "What was that about?" "Our son thanking us for living well," Willa said, "for showing him how to build a good life. We did that, did we not?" Parker said, looking around at the gathering, at the ranch spread out behind them, at the tangible evidence of their years together. "We did," Willa agreed. "We really did." As the party continued into the evening, Willa found herself standing apart for a moment, just observing. She watched her children dancing, her grandchildren playing, her husband laughing with old friends. She thought about the girl she had been, standing outside that foreclosed house with nothing but despair and a quickly fading will to continue. She thought about the woman she had become, strong and sure and loved. Pearl approached her, linking their arms together. "You look thoughtful, Mama." "Just remembering," Willa said, "the hard times." "Yes, but also the good times, all of it, the whole journey." "Was it worth it?" all the struggle and hardship. Willa looked at her daughter, this fierce, intelligent woman she had raised. "Every moment," she said firmly. "Every single moment led me here to this life, to this family. How could I regret any of it?" "I want to be like you," Pearl said quietly. "Strong and certain and unafraid." "Oh, sweetheart, I have been afraid plenty of times. I was terrified when I lost the first house, when I had to accept help from your father when each of you were born. Fear is not something you eliminate. You just learn to act despite it. Did you know?" Pearl asked. "When you met Papa, did you know he was the one?" Willa considered the question. "Not immediately. But I knew he was someone special, someone kind in a world that often is not. And I knew that when he looked at me, he saw me as I actually was, not just my circumstances. That is a powerful thing, being truly seen." "I hope I find that," Pearl said. "You will. You already have good judgment. You will recognize it when it appears." Willa squeezed her daughter's arm. "And you will have the courage to reach for it, even if it scares you. I taught you that." As the night wore on and the party finally wound down, the extended family helping to clean up and then heading to their own homes, Willa and Parker found themselves alone again in the house that had been the center of their life together. "Tired?" Parker asked. "A good tired," Willa said. "The kind that comes from a full life." They prepared for bed with the ease of long familiarity, each knowing the other's routines and rhythms. As they lay together in the dark, Parker said, "I have been thinking about something." "What is that?" "About how glad I am that those men were harassing me that day in Sierra City. If they had not been, you might not have intervened. We might never have truly met." Willa laughed softly. "So you are grateful for prejudice and violence?" "No. But I am grateful for your courage in standing against it. That is when I first saw who you truly were." "A woman with a talent for bluffing," Willa said dryly. "A woman with a strong sense of justice and the bravery to act on it." Parker rolled to face her in the darkness. "That is who you have always been, Willa. From the very beginning. You bring out the best in me," Willa said. "You always have. We bring out the best in each other. That is what a good partnership does." They fell silent then, holding each other in the comfortable quiet. After a while, Parker's breathing deepened into sleep, but Willa lay awake a bit longer, thinking about the long road that had brought her here. She thought about Thomas, her first husband, buried in the Sierra City cemetery. She had forgiven him long ago for the debts he had left behind. He had been a dreamer who had not quite understood how to turn dreams into reality. But he had loved her in his way, and their brief marriage had brought her to Nevada, which had ultimately brought her to Parker. She thought about the banker who had foreclosed on her property, about Sam who had given her a job, about the countless small kindnesses from neighbors and strangers that had helped her survive. Most of all, she thought about Parker, about this man who had seen her at her lowest and had chosen to offer his hand. Not to save her, as she had initially thought, but to walk beside her while she saved herself. The next morning, Willa woke before Parker, which was unusual. She lay still for a moment, watching him sleep, this man who had been her partner for more than 3 decades. His face was deeply lined now, his hair more gray than brown, but he was still the most handsome man she had ever known. She rose quietly and went to the kitchen to start breakfast. As she worked, she heard Parker get up, heard the sounds of him washing and dressing. By the time he came into the kitchen, coffee was ready and bacon was sizzling in the pan. "You are up early," Parker observed, accepting the coffee she poured for him. "I wanted to watch the sunrise," Willa said. "And I wanted some quiet time to think. About gratitude, about how lucky I am, about how hope really does grow where it is watered with kindness." Parker set down his coffee and came to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "We have been fortunate," he agreed, "but we also worked hard for what we have." Both things are true, Willa said, leaning back against him. We were given chances and we made the most of them. They stood like that for a while, watching through the window as the sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. The land they had worked for so many years stretched out before them, familiar and beloved. "What do you want to do today?" Parker asked. "I want to ride up to the line shack," Willa said suddenly. "I have not been up there in years." "That is a long ride," Parker cautioned. "Are you sure?" "I am sure. I want to see it again to remember." So after breakfast, they saddled 2 horses and rode out, taking their time and enjoying the journey as much as the destination. The trail was well maintained now, used regularly by the ranch hands who worked the high pastures. As they climbed higher, the air grew cooler and the views more spectacular. When they finally reached the line shack, Willa dismounted and stood looking at it. The young couple who lived there kept it neat, but the basic structure was unchanged. It was still the same rough cabin where she had learned to hope again. "May I go inside?" Willa called out. The young woman, Mary, came to the door and smiled. "Of course, Mrs. Preston. Please come in." Willa walked through the door and was immediately transported back in time. The layout was identical. The fireplace where she had cooked her first meals, the window where she had watched for Parker's visits, the corner where her narrow bed had stood. "Are you all right, Mama?" a voice asked, and Willa turned to see Samuel had ridden up behind them, checking on the herd. "I am fine," Willa assured him. "Just remembering. This is where you met Papa?" Samuel asked, looking around with new interest. "This is where he brought me after I lost my first home. This is where he taught me that kindness can change everything." "Tell me," Samuel said, settling on a stool. "Tell me the whole story. I have heard pieces, but I want to hear all of it." So Willa told him. She told him about losing Thomas, about the foreclosure, about standing in her empty house with nothing left. She told him about meeting Parker, about his kindness, about the job and this cabin. She told him about falling in love slowly and carefully, about learning to trust again, about finding the courage to hope. Parker added his own memories, about seeing Willa in town and knowing she was special, about wanting to help but not wanting to patronize her, about falling in love with her strength as much as her beauty. Samuel listened intently, and when they finished, he said, "I am going to tell this story to my children. And I am going to tell them that this is what love looks like. Not just romance, but genuine partnership. Not just affection, but active kindness. That is what you two have shown me." "That is all we ever wanted," Parker said, taking Willa's hand. "To build something real and to show our children how it is done." They rode back to the main house together, 3 generations of Prestons, carrying with them the story of how hope had been lost and found again. The years continued to pass, as they do, bringing both joys and sorrows. In 1915, Pearl's husband died unexpectedly, and she returned to the ranch for a time with her 2 children. Willa held her daughter through her grief, understanding in a way only someone who had lost a spouse could. She shared what she had learned about healing, about allowing yourself to feel the pain but not be destroyed by it. "Does it get easier?" Pearl asked one night, her eyes red from crying. "Not easier," Willa said honestly, "but different. The grief becomes part of you rather than all of you. And eventually, you find that you can carry it and still live a full life." "Did you ever think you would love again, after Thomas?" "Not at first. But yes, eventually I allowed myself to imagine it. And when I met your father, I decided to be brave enough to reach for happiness, even though I was still healing." Pearl did eventually recover, and even found love again with a widower who owned a mercantile in town. Willa attended her daughter's second wedding with gratitude, knowing that Pearl had learned the lesson about resilience and hope. In 1918, the Spanish flu swept through Nevada, as it did the entire world. The Preston family was fortunate, suffering only mild cases, but several neighbors were not so lucky. Willa and Parker spent months helping where they could, bringing food to quarantined families, caring for children whose parents were sick. "We have been so blessed," Willa said during that difficult time. "We have to share what we have." "Kindness watering hope," Parker said with a tired smile. "Even now, after all these years, you are still doing it." "We both are," Willa corrected. "We both always have been." By 1920, Parker and Willa were both in their 60s, officially old by the standards of the time. But they were healthy and active, still involved in ranch life, still riding and working when they felt like it. They had 7 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren, a legacy of love and hard work. On a warm summer evening, they sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. The ranch was quiet, the day's work done. Samuel and his family lived in the main house now, having fully taken over operations. Parker and Willa had moved to a smaller cottage on the property, built specifically for them. It was cozy and comfortable, perfect for their needs. "You have any regrets?" Willa asked Parker suddenly. "About what?" "About life. About the choices we made, about anything." Parker thought for a long moment. "I regret that we could not have more children. I regret the years we lost before we met. But about the life we built together, not a single regret." "No regrets," Willa said firmly. "Even the hard parts led to something good. Even the pain had purpose." "That is a generous way to view suffering," Parker observed. "It is a practical way. If I believe my suffering had no purpose, then it was just cruelty. But if I believe it led me to where I needed to be, then it was part of the journey. I prefer to believe the latter." "My eternal optimist," Parker said fondly. "Not always," Willa admitted. "You remember. There was a time when I had almost no hope left, but you helped me find it again. You watered it with your kindness until it grew into something strong." Parker reached over and took her hand, their fingers intertwining with practiced ease. "We saved each other," he said. "That is the truth of it. I was drifting when I met you, working hard but not really living. You gave me purpose, a reason to build rather than just survive." "We did good, did we not?" Willa said, looking out at the land they had cultivated, the family they had raised. "We did very good," Parker agreed. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Willa felt a profound sense of peace. This was what happiness looked like, she thought. Not grand moments or dramatic gestures, but this quiet contentment. This sense of having lived well and loved deeply. "I would do it all again," Willa said softly. "Every moment, even the painful ones, because they all led to this." "So would I," Parker said. "Every single moment." They sat in comfortable silence as night fell fully. 2 people who had found each other in the wilderness and built something lasting. Parker lived to be 73 years old, passing peacefully in his sleep in 1925. Willa woke beside him on a cool spring morning and knew immediately that he was gone. She did not scream or cry out. She simply held his hand and said goodbye to the man who had changed her life. At his funeral, attended by what seemed like half the county, Willa stood strong and dry-eyed. She shared stories about Parker, about his kindness and his work ethic, about his love for the land and his family. She told the gathered crowd that Parker had taught her that hope grows where it is watered with kindness, and that she intended to spend the rest of her life proving that lesson true. After Parker's death, Willa stayed in the cottage on the ranch, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. She took over teaching the youngest grandchildren to read, a task she found deeply satisfying. She continued her sewing, making quilts for each family member. She worked in her garden and took short rides when the weather was good, but mostly, she told stories. She told the story of meeting Parker, of the line shack, of building the ranch from nothing. She told stories about overcoming hardship and finding love. She made sure that every person in her family knew where they came from and what values they were expected to uphold. Kindness, she would say to her great-grandchildren as they sat at her feet. That is the most important thing. Be kind, especially to those who are struggling. You never know whose hope you might be watering. Willa lived to be 81 years old, dying in the summer of 1927. She passed away surrounded by 3 generations of the family she and Parker had created. Her last words were to her eldest son, Samuel. "Take care of the land," she said. "And take care of each other. Remember that hope grows where it is watered with kindness. Promise me you will remember." "I promise, Mama," Samuel said through his tears. "We all promise." Willa was buried next to Parker on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a sky as vast and blue as the one she had gazed at so many times. Her headstone reads simply, "Willa Preston, beloved wife, mother, and friend, she watered hope with kindness." The Preston Ranch continued to operate for generations, passed down through the family. The story of Parker and Willa became family legend, told and retold at gatherings and holidays. The lined shack in the high country was preserved as a memorial to where it all began, a reminder that from the smallest seed of kindness, the greatest love can grow. And every person who heard the story took away the same lesson, that when hope is nearly gone, it only takes one person's kindness to bring it back. That the act of watering another person's hope does not diminish your own, but instead creates abundance. That love built on genuine respect and partnership can weather any storm. That the strongest dreams are built slowly, carefully, with 2 people working together toward a common goal. Years after Willa's death, her great-great-grandchildren would visit the graves on the hill. They would stand there and look out at the land that Parker and Willa had built from nothing, and they would understand in their bones what it meant to persist, to hope, to love well. The ranch eventually became a historical landmark, recognized not just for its agricultural success, but for the story of the 2 people who had built it. Visitors would come to see the preserved lined shack, to walk the land that Parker and Willa had worked, to hear the story of how a cowboy had rekindled a widow's dying hope with simple, consistent kindness. And that story, passed down through generations, continued to inspire people facing their own dark times. It reminded them that giving up is never the only option, that accepting help is not weakness, that love can bloom even in the harshest soil if it is tended with care. Hope truly does grow where it is watered with kindness. Parker Preston had known that when he fixed Willa Owens' roof on that long-ago morning. Willa had proven it by transforming her life from desperation to abundance. Together, they had created a legacy that outlasted them both, a testament to the power of one person choosing to be kind to another in their moment of need. Their story became more than just family history. It became a parable, a reminder, a call to action. Be the person who waters hope. Be the person who extends kindness expecting nothing in return. Be the person who sees someone drowning and throws them a rope, not to save them but to give them the tools to save themselves. That was the true gift Parker had given Willa, not rescue but partnership, not charity but opportunity, not pity but respect. And that was the gift Willa had given back, not just gratitude but love, not just acceptance but reciprocity, not just survival but thriving. In the end, that is what their story was about. 2 people who found each other when both needed it most and chose to build something beautiful together. 2 people who proved that the darkest night is not permanent, that the deepest despair can be overcome, that hope is never truly gone as long as someone is willing to water it with kindness. Their love story, born in hardship and nurtured through years of hard work and mutual devotion, stood as proof that the best things in life are worth fighting for, worth working for, worth believing in even when belief feels impossible. And in a world that often seemed determined to crush the weak and celebrate only the strong, Parker and Willa's story whispered a different truth, that we are all both weak and strong, that we all need help sometimes, and that the measure of a person is not whether they need help but what they do when they receive it and what they do when they have the opportunity to offer it to someone else. That was their legacy, carved not just in stone on their graves but in the lives of everyone who heard their story and decided to water someone else's hope with kindness. That was their gift to the world, a simple lesson lived out in one lifetime. Love grows where it is planted with care, tended with patience, and watered with kindness. And in the high country of Nevada, on the land they had claimed and cultivated, under the vast western sky they had both loved, Parker and Willa's story lived on, generation after generation, reminding everyone who heard it that hope is never truly gone, that kindness matters, and that love, real love built on partnership and respect, can conquer anything.